Hey, everybody. Welcome to our podcast. This is The Heels of Time. I am Theo with my so eloquently spoken co host, Derek. Say hi
I
to the
thank you,
audience,
sir.
everybody. Hi.
Howdy, howdy.
So, coming at you not quite live, but that's okay. Um, it'll be a
Close
premiere
enough.
video. It'll be a premiere. So, today
Yeah.
we're going to take on we're still going on with the Iliad. This is going to be number 2 segment of who knows how many we're going to actually end up doing. But here's number 2. So if you missed last week, shame on you. But that's okay. Go ahead and like and subscribe, and maybe you'll go back and you won't be so lost this week. Yes,
Nice.
just a forewarning. Are there going to be some spoilers? Yes, both of the Iliad, both of Wheel of Time, as we're kind of meshing them together. So if you haven't read or watched any movies or any episodes of Wheel of Time / Troy or whatever, yeah, you're going to be a little lost. A little? We'll wrap you in. But yeah, know that there will be some spoilers, so I want to get that out of the way right
Most
away.
definitely. Hmm.
So, last time you heard me drone on forever. So, we're going to kind of flip it over to Derek as he shakes his head. Because he has a very interesting thought. And when he brought it up to my attention, I was like, dude, you got to talk about it.
Oh, I
So,
appreciate it, man.
so go for it.
All right.
What you got for
Well,
everybody?
I'm gonna kind of tease this out of you
Yeah.
with the Socratic method.
Ooh,
Do you like that?
I did. Yeah,
Okay.
impressive.
So Theo, can you tell me about Homer, the writer of the Iliad, right? If the accredited creator of the Iliad,
Right.
let's put it that way, right? So for suspend your disbelief, audience, if you are some particular scholar that has gone into the weeds on this. We are not going to argue about whether or not Homer was a human being or a group of humans. So, for the point of this discussion, we're just going to say Homer was a guy. So, if Homer was a guy, can you tell me what was Homer's profession, Theo? Tell our audience, explain.
Straight up poet.
Poet. Okay. Like that.
I would say you could almost call him like the poet laureate now.
Mm.
He wrote like the epics. Um,
Oh, he wrote the
Iliad.
epics.
Yep, Iliad,
I like that.
Odyssey.
Hmm.
They're obviously classical writings. They've been around for oh man, almost 3,000 years, I guess.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
close
Wow, wow,
enough.
wow.
Depending on when you actually want to say that they were created, because that's of course in who knows territory.
Sure, sure.
So yeah,
But
that's
but
what he did.
so he wasn't known for being a lawyer or a
Nope,
politician.
nope.
Okay, so
Dude
must
was
have
straight
been
up.
pretty damn good then if he was able to live off of that, right?
So here's the interesting part. So we're gonna say, like you said, we're gonna assume he was one singular guy.
Mm.
I have thoughts on that because I don't think he was a singular guy.
Right, right. I understood.
So the kicker is most people believe he was also blind.
Oh,
So he did all of this sightless.
oh, that's an interesting twist.
Um,
Uh,
so to be honest, the chances of him actually like writing it
if he was one
blinded
single guy that was blind, right?
would
Not.
be tough.
Mm,
Would he be an orator?
mm.
Yes. Would he be killer with that? I would. If again, if it's one guy, he'd probably be the most epic dude. You'd want to go see him in an amphitheater.
Now, a testament to contemporary times, as in
Mm-hmm.
times that have modern dates that we more or less don't argue the authenticity of. There was a mathematician, German mathematician, or, well, in that area of the Prussian
World.
Empire or whatever at
Yeah.
the time, 1800s, named Euler. And Euler did a lot of work after he lost his sight. This is complicated technical mathematical
Stuff.
writings, right?
Yep.
So, it holds water that if he was born sighted and became a prolific writer, reader, and then lost his sight, he's kind of mentioned, like, how is he depicted? What does he look like? What does he look like? Like, I mean, no one really knows, right? But
Yeah.
when they make like a statue or a likeness of him,
You'd laugh. You'd think he'd be like the epitome of like an old Greek scholar.
okay,
So he would be like robed,
Mm.
curlyish hair,
yeah, yeah,
and curly beard.
mm. With like the thick mustaches, so to
I mean,
speak.
not like bushy, but
All
yeah,
right, not okay.
trimmed
All
out.
right,
Nice.
so not like Death on
Nice
a Nile, but
No, you're looking at like Leonidas and Sparta territory.
okay, yeah, no, I got it, I got it, I got it. Okay,
Not
Uh,
pointed though. It was kind of weird, but yeah.
so he would have been at least the mythology of him. What he's probably considered to be like well traveled. Is that right?
Again, considering he's the one dude, yes. So
Hmm.
if you're the one guy, I would say the best way to describe it would be, although he didn't play an instrument, he would be like a traveling poet. So
Mm.
it'd be like, oh man, this dude's gonna do this crazy poem, man. Let's go to this like jazz club and go watch him. So he would do like his like a poet jam, and he would just go and like do his thing, and then go to
Mm.
the next city, and then the next city. So it'd be like a traveling orator.
Wow. So people are just throwing money at him for the amazing way he's able to tell these stories.
That'd be how I would.
That's the
assume it would be.
presumption, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I
Yeah.
would, or he would go to like a tavern, and
Mm.
they'd give him food, and they would give him drink or whatever. I mean, that's how I would
Yeah.
assume, which wouldn't be so far off from like a medieval times bard, right?
Oh
'Cause
wow.
they kind of did
Oh
the same
wow.
thing because they would tell the story with like the lyre or the lute or whatever,
So we kind of have
playing them
Homer the
jams.
Homer
But
the
he's-
Bard kind of is the picture that I'm getting.
But
Okay.
as far as I know, no
Hmm.
music for him.
Not necessarily, so no music, but one has to wonder the way that it's originally written in Greek, and you've mentioned this, so this is for the audience. It's meant to flow in a certain way.
I was gonna say he's almost like I'd almost call him like an acapellic rapper
I like that.
because
So,
his flow is like Homeric pentameter, which goes
mm,
it's the 5 syllables. It just flows. And in the ancient Greek text, if you're reading it that way, it's just like I mean, it's like a rhythm. It's almost like a
wow.
horse galloping.
Okay.
So it's easy to kind of go in the flow. It's easy to like remember, and then it's also easy. It doesn't like rhyme or anything. And the reason why I say it'd be difficult for him to write, I'm not digging on any kind of like sightless folks because I got eye issues too. But the way that ancient Greeks wrote, you got to remember they wrote all capitals, no accents, so that's cool. No spaces, right to left, and then the next line was left to right and backwards.
That's right. So
Not mirror app, but the letters would be like reversed.
what we refer to as our lowercase letters or our writing letters, if you're an older American, those would eventually be referred to as the minuscules. And the Greek alphabet did not start with minuscules, only the larger letters that we
Right.
would refer to now as capital letters. Yeah.
Right.
So,
it would have been difficult, and it's in an era that not a ton of people able to read and write. Just because, well, in order to read and write, you had to invest time.
okay, no, that's a
Time
good point.
is good for farming and
Right.
that kind of stuff.
So
Well-
a lot of his audience would necessarily require, like, let's say to not argue the point. Let's just
Right.
say he wrote it down and then pulled out his paper and read it to everybody.
Right.
It wouldn't have mattered if they got a hand on his paper. They wouldn't have been able to read it anyway.
Probably not.
But
The vast majority, like, yeah.
But most scholars, and I'm an oddball, and I have no expertise on this. Most scholars would actually say he orated it. He used this system to kind of remember the stories just in his
A
mind.
mimetic scheme. Yeah.
Okay, so what if I told you that, or reminded you that there's a character in Wheel of Time who's a traveling bard.
Huh.
He tells stories for his meals.
Who's a badass?
He's a badass. He's an older gentleman with a curly beard with mustaches.
Hmm.
He's well. He knows the history. He knows the
Well
ancient
traveled.
histories. Yes, well traveled. Now there is one thing I forgot to ask you, and
Hmm.
we'll circle along it later. Well, actually, no. I'll just come out and say it.
Do it.
Do we know anything about Homer's life apart from just his writings? Like, are there any conjectures or or even any legendary stories? Like,
So here's the interesting part. Where is Homer conglomerate or Homer like a guy?
mm,
So other than his two epic poems, Iliad and Odyssey, there's not much known about him. Period. It's like it's this crazy dude, and here's his stuff,
okay,
but there's no background. They're not even really sure when he was born. They're pretty sure he was
yeah,
real.
mm,
Herodotus, if you don't know who he is, he's like the first historian.
right, right,
He lived in like 484 to 425 ish BCE,
mm.
or BC rather, or BC, same deal. Duh.
So quite a time after Homer, then.
Yes, because the how he described it is Homer did because he wrote down all the histories, and he's like Homer preceded me by several centuries.
Oh,
So what does that?
oh, that's interesting.
So what does that mean? What
Mm.
is? It's like, oh, I'll get there in a minute. Does that mean 60 seconds or does that mean a bit?
No, I get what you're saying. So it would be
Several. Who knows?
like if we look at like a modern example, like that'd be like President Bill Clinton saying, "Sure." Well, actually, who was president in the '70s? Like Jimmy
Carter.
Carter. Yeah, saying, yeah, Washington preceded me by a few hundred years. Well, he doesn't really know who George Washington is, other than the writings that
Right.
they would have on him,
Exactly.
and our modern take on history. Well, we have these years that are marked every solar
Year.
rotation,
Yep.
and we get that originally from the Julian calendar, and now most of the world observes the Gregorian calendar. Although, if you look, that's arguable. Um,
Right.
Recently, I learned that our Eastern Orthodox friends,
Hey.
for their holidays, right? For their holidays, they follow the Julian calendar, or in a adapted version of it, right?
Right. Yep.
So, and then I know there's the Chinese calendar and other calendars as
Mm-hmm.
well. I'm not trying to be so Westernly focused here on the show. We try to be broad. We try to have a broad mind. But what you're saying, so it sounds like you're kind of saying, if we
Yeah,
if
the
we
date
take
range.
if
The
we
date
take what
range,
Herodotus,
yeah,
right.
is like 750 BCE to 1200 BCE.
Wow,
So,
wow. Okay,
because the
yeah,
Trojan
yeah.
War that he's talking about isn't like, oh, it happened in 1000 and we know this for a fact. Uh,
Okay, so
he's talking.
the war is something that's, yeah. Okay, perfect. So what if I then told you that there's this character in Wheel of Time? He's a bard.
Mm-hmm.
He's a traveling entertainer. He lives
Mm-hmm.
off of his. Guess what? He speaks in something that he calls high chant.
Hmm.
Does that sound kind of Homeric to you?
Sounds it.
All right. So
Sounds like it could be.
he gets into all kinds of shenanigans to the point where he really understands the world, which it appears Homer really understands the world, like at least war. The way he describes these brutal, terrible things that are happening, it occurs to me and many scholars that he would have been a witness to this, or right, a witness to maybe not that event, but a witness to war, firsthand. So we have this character that fits all of these checks box.
Jax.
Um, so what if I told you that the character Tom Merlin, which you probably were like, okay, he fits all these checkbox, sure.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he's Homer. But Theo, I'm gonna do something very careful because I know
Okay.
So we're designed to be like a podcast to listen to.
Right, right.
So Homer, Homer,
Mm-hmm.
Tom Merlin is not Tom. For
Right.
some reason, Robert Jordan decided to put an H in his name. So he spells his name
THOM, right?
Hom,
Mm-hmm.
and then Merlin is Merriln. So right in the middle of Tom Merlin's name, everybody, is Homer. There's an extra M in there, but it's Hommer, right in the middle of Tom Merlin's name. So Hills of Time, first exclusive drop on this little clue that Robert Jordan left for us all these years ago. So I think you've led me to the conclusion that Tom Merlin is Homer with what you've told me about what we know about Homer.
Well,
Uh,
to me, if I can interject real quick,
yeah.
it would kind of make sense, right?
Mm,
So if you have this dude Homer talking about two of the things that the Iliad and the Odyssey, and of course, if you've never read them, is they're huge. I mean, we're talking like I think it was 25,000 lines just of the Iliad. So that's a novel, right? So that's a long story, and it'd be things that would be semi-familiar with folks. They would know who Achilles is,
right.
Agamemnon. They would know Priam. They would know of Troy. Everybody would know it in the Odyssey's case. They would know the trials and tribulations of Odysseus. They were also plays in other dramas, tragedies. I want to say comedies because they weren't really comedic. So these would be stories that people would have known already, in a way. He
Right.
just put it in like an epic form. Like, dang, this is nice. And Tom does the same thing throughout the Wheel of Time, right?
Actually,
So-
yes. He
talks about the stuff from
Well,
the past.
he literally says, "One day I want to sit down and write an epic."
So yeah, that's like right there, right?
That's right
So-
there. I think so.
He talks in a I wouldn't say a funny manner because he doesn't talk it, but when he does his bard thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's in a little bit different, which makes him interesting.
Mm-hmm.
There's people that try to imitate, but you're not gonna get the original.
No one can be like
No one
Tom
can
Merlin.
match him.
That's right.
So yeah, he's got all the other like supernatural abilities almost, like with those knives and stuff. So that stuff is like not Homeric.
Right. That's someone else,
Right.
probably.
Maybe. Maybe another episode.
Mm-hmm. We'll get back to that.
But anyway, we're talking about the Bard of Tom and
That's right.
the poetry of Homer. We'll say it like that.
Right.
And they both tell stories. They both wrap things around that people would have probably may have heard of before, may have had an inclination of like an old history of it. I wouldn't say necessarily taught in school per se, but you would have been like taught it. Myths become legends, and then
Well, I
that kind
can
of-
imagine that in Randland, after it's all said and done, when people learn to read and write in school, they're going to be reading and writing about the stories of how Rand saved the world.
right. Or
Absolutely.
maybe somebody else, because the name
Or
may
maybe
change,
somebody
right?
else. Yeah, maybe Merlin saved the world.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
Right,
it also
right.
goes to that aspect, which also I think is interesting. So in terms of storytelling, it's like Tom is the guy doing the narrating while he's there. If
Yeah,
that
I
makes-
think
if
so.
that makes-
No,
and also telling the story from background, like almost like
I-
a narrator type.
Well, I was thinking about leaving this for another episode, but you led right into it so well. There is something that if you blink, you'll miss it. And Tom Merlin, I do believe breaks the fourth wall, and he's the only character that does it. Balzamon, Moradin, Ishmael, he comes close, but Tom Merlin straight up breaks it. There's this line at the end. I'm not going to quote it. I don't want whatever, but I'll just look it up. It's in the very last book. Tom Merlin dispatches Black Aja, presumably Black Aja member, and he describes him slumping to the ground like a sack of potatoes or something. And then in character, he reflects saying that's cliche. That's written too many times. I need to say something better than that. And then he changes the line to something else. In the book, like it happens as you read it. So ergo, I would say he's the writer. He's the narrator of the big story. I hope to touch on an episode, Theo, where we talk about Loial actually being the writer of specifically The Dragon Reborn. Robert Jordan credits him with it. It'll say excerpt from Loial's The Dragon Reborn. And Loial is another character that's always talking about writing a book.
Yep.
But he never breaks the fourth wall like this. So I think the crux of what comes out of Wheel of Time, like if we try to do the thing where like, well, Wheel of Time is supposed to be like our future, but also our past, right?
Right.
So the crux of the stuff that came out of Wheel of Time was probably written by Tom Merlin then. The stuff that survived. The stuff that didn't survive, Loial probably wrote that. So Tom Merlin, he's going to make it more down to earth. He even says this in the series. He talks about, well, Rand is throwing all these fireballs and stuff like that. He's like, who's to say that me, Tom Merlin, maybe the bard, maybe I'm the one that, breathed fire. So to me,
down
that's
the road.
Yep. So to me, that's saying, well, maybe he wrote the Excalibur stories. Maybe he wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, right?
Right.
So, but definitely he's the presumptive writer of the Wheel of Time series. So in that way, we kind of find Robert Jordan snuck himself into the series, I think, as Tom Merlin also then, because he's the literal writer. And one thing that makes to tie this all together, that makes Robert Jordan a bit like Homer, is that he saw the world and he was in a war. He saw that terrible stuff firsthand. And then he got to see the world on top of that. And he got to learn and about many cultures. And I think because of that is why we have such a beautiful epic. I'll just call Wheel of Time an epic. I don't know what the typical technical definition is. But
good enough, man. I think it's epic.
I think so. I mean, one of the last chapters in the last book of the series has as many words as the first book in the Harry Potter series.
Right.
So
just let that sink in for a second.
Just let that sink in for a second.
Lots of words.
Lots of words. So lots of detail. Lots of repetition, not repeating things, but describing things from different angles.
Yep.
To make it all kind of stick together. So what do you think?
Which is also very Homeric.
Also very Homeric. So what do you think? Tom Merlin, T. Homer Aaron?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I brought it up for a reason. And you notice that little name merging, so to speak.
It's right there.
And
unbelievable.
And I like how you put in Homer, Tom Merlin with Robert Jordan. Because I think that is also a connection. Because if you're like, oh, I think Robert Jordan inserted himself into the storyline, who's it going to be?
Who's it going to be, right?
Who would it be? It'd be
Tom Merlin,
dude that would be telling a story, right? Because that's what he's doing.
Right, that's exactly right.
He's telling a story. Mm-hmm. So if you have all of that, you have the speech patterns, the how they describe things, both by Tom and by Robert Jordan, and you compare it to Homer. I said it last episode. I'll say it again this episode. I'll probably say for every damn episode we have on the Iliad and the Odyssey. Mm-hmm. When I read The Wheel of Time, the first thing I thought of was the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And man, how many years ago was it, man, that you actually introduced me to this series? It was like what, 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
So sad fact. You told me that. I went and bought a copy of the book, but I cracked it open, but I just never got far enough into it to appreciate it until recently.
Yep.
And I had to get an audiobook for myself. That was the best move to go because I started a new job and it would have been impossible otherwise. But I found a decent translation, Theo tells me. Probably not the best one, but
Good
definitely
enough.
definitely better than Jupiter
Dr. Seuss that I
and
tried to run into, which was
this
terrible.
cat
Ah,
this cat in the hat.
yeah, it was bad.
So you think we found him?
I think
Think we
so,
found
man.
Homer?
And
Yeah, I
like I
think
said,
so.
I mean, I think it makes sense
Yeah, I
because
think so.
if you were going to, if you're Robert Jordan
Hmm.
and you think of ancient writers, not necessarily of like quote, I'll be quoting facts. You're not going to say, I think I'm going to model my story after Herodotus.
No.
Probably not. I'm not going to like make my writings. If you could make it like Marcus Aurelius, that'd be awesome. But
Mm,
probably not, because it's not going to be out for the masses, right?
right.
So what got the most bang for the buck?
Mm,
Gotta be Homer, in my mind, because there's been movies, there's been shows, both of the Odyssey and the Iliad, to varying degrees of how good they were, naturally. But we're talking about something that's been still talked about. However many, I mean, well, I'll just say 3,000 years, make it easy.
sure.
3,000 years later, there's not too many stories. Now, yes, we have historic things, of course,
Hmm. Hmm.
but in terms of an actual story, that's like a histodrama, perhaps. Not
Right.
quite 100% factual, but probably. I mean, okay, yeah, there's not going to be like medieval beasts like coming out from the ocean and like swallowing things. Like, yeah, I don't think that kind of stuff goes down, or, some of the magical things that go down.
Right. Right.
No.
Right. Right.
So that's fictional. But what would be the epic thing that you're gonna base your novel off of, or at least the stylistically? This would be a perfect choice.
Especially when you're dealing with soldiery and visceral battles, right?
Right. Yep.
Because there's a big chunk of
This is all.
Iliad
It's
that's
it's the big bad. It's battles,
it is a
and
battle, but there's a big chunk where it's literally just this person is disemboweled this way and this person's decapitated in this fashion.
right,
It's very specific
visceral. It's
and
visceral.
visceral, and it just chimes in of like someone probably understood that this stuff happened. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if he was a soldier, but he knew like,
Nobody knows.
okay, this is not. And the cadence is even interesting. It's not, if you're careful when you read it, it's not the Hollywood.
Mm-mm.
You form up over here, you form up over there. Everyone is matched up,
March.
and we all go together. No,
No,
it's
this
subtle,
is
but they talk about it like you alluded to. These are colonies, and they took over the farmland, and eventually that was not okay anymore. And
you
eventually
got to
a,
make a move.
a buildup of armies started to come out, and
Yep.
so on. Yeah.
So,
So yeah, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I think it's a good match.
Mm.
And a good basis for I'm thinking, like I said, first time I read the Wheel of Time, those are the first things I thought of. I was like, damn, this person is Odysseus, this person's Achilles, I mean, I was like matching character for character. And ironically, now that so many years later that we're actually doing a show like this, uh, I wasn't that far off being a novice reading all this stuff
No,
in terms of like Wheel of Time.
no,
So
definitely.
I'm happy that a I already fulfilled my like goal of this entire series was I got one person to read a book, and I got Derek to read the Iliad. So whether or not anybody else in the entire world that ever watches me can say, we didn't give two craps what you had to say, I got one person to read something different. So I've already fulfilled my goal.
Well, dude, I
So I'm
appreciate
happy.
that. That means a hell of a lot to me, let me tell you. But let me also add this. I just realized something.
Go for it.
So, you know how one of the versions of, well, how did the Trojan War start? We talk about Helen being kidnapped, right?
Right.
Well, Tom Merlin had to rescue Maureen from being kidnapped.
Yes.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. I told you there's some
There's a lot of
correlations
stuff
here.
there. Mm.
Yeah. You had to fight. There's some like crazy stuff that goes down. Yeah. Sieges, war.
sieges a vast naval fleet from the west,
Mhm.
comes in to occupy
Something in the
the
east.
lands. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. So, and again, that's just a tidbit, y'all.
Oh,
This is just number two of
so so
many.
so check this out. Here's the last thing that you'll have to look this up
Uh-oh.
yourself. Randland and
Randland.
Sanshin. Sanshin is a nation of islands.
Hmm.
Randland is a big land mass.
Mass.
They kind of resemble modern day Turkey and the Grecian islands.
I mean, that would kind of make sense, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Just saying.
So, just some fat for y'all to chew on, so you can come back next time when we look at the next thing in the Iliad more in depth, which we have at least two episodes to go. And in that time, if we often find out, oh, this is too much material, and we tend to split up the episodes a little bit. So look forward to a lot more coming your way. Please grab a copy of the Iliad on audiobooks. A lot of times you can, you get your Amazon credits, you can get a free one. Hey, I'll be honest, that's what I did. But
Hey, and for me,
whatever
because
you can do.
I am a purist, and my audio copies were just so dang I couldn't do it.
Mm,
The copy I got, it literally is world renowned. It got like the award in 1991. Yes, it's old school, but it's a translation. Robert Fergalis, hopefully I said his name right. Sorry. His translation is awesome. It's it is considered like almost the pure to English translation for the Iliad. It's by Penguin. It's published by Penguin Classics. It's like $7, so it's
mm.
still not terrible. Just
Nice.
saying,
Get everyone to get your copy, read it, and if you are a seasoned Wheel of Time reader, which I hope that's why you're here,
right?
uh, read the Iliad and then pick up. I would say, especially, uh, at least start with book five. That's when you really start. Well, actually, I'll take that back. I mean, the Sanshin, their buildup starts in book two, uh, but yeah. You know what? Read the whole series. Who cares? Tom Merlin's in the whole series. He's
Right,
Homer.
yeah,
Check it out.
exactly. All right, y'all. Have a good rest of the week. We'll catch you next week.
Like and subscribe.